Hello. I'll be talking tonight about Polish Blake, Polski Blake. That is a project aimed at translating the entire poetry and prose of William Blake into Polish. But as you'll see, that project I'll be describing also involves other ways of approaching that Polishness of William Blake. For example, from the perspective of the history of the reception of that grand poet, artist, visionary in our country. And as you see, well, hear rather, but perhaps also see, maybe there are subtitles. I decided to rely on English because of the character of today's, or tonight's event. Also because English was, or is, the language of William Blake. But since this talk is to a large extent about translation, it'll be interspersed with some insertions, some illustrations also in the Polish language. And I'll divide this talk into two parts. In the first, I'll elaborate on the basics, that is the rationale behind the project aimed at translating the complete works of William Blake into Polish and publishing these translations in the form of a critical edition under the umbrella term William Blake Dzieła Zebrane. Okay, and after that, I'll tell you also about the conception, the unique features of those projected publications. Okay, so first, the rationale. So why is it a good idea to translate the complete works of William Blake, and why Blake? Why complete works, and why translate into Polish? And in the description of this talk, I have used, I think, a very persuasive, very resonantly phrased argument derived from the autobiographical book of Czesław Miłosz, The Land of Ulro. Here's the Polish version, where our Nobel Prize winner says that, and let me quote here the Polish original. He says that Blake jest jedną z kilku figur wyróżniających się na tle historii ostatnich lat 2000. And I cite the Polish original rather than the translation by Louis Iribarne, because the latter mistranslates here, saying that Blake was one of a handful of figures to emerge in the last couple of centuries. Hello, the original doesn't say the last couple of centuries, but let me quote it again. Blake jest jedną z kilku figur wyróżniających się na tle historii ostatnich lat 2000. So this is what Miłosz originally claimed in Ziemia Ulro. And in this book, he very much supports this claim by selecting indeed a handful of figures as the major foci of his spiritual, intellectual autobiography. So he talks a lot about Mickiewicz, then about the Swedish Swedenborg, also about Oskar Miłosz, so Miłosz's relative who wrote in French, also to a degree, to an extent, about Dostoevsky. But the most prominent figure in Miłosz's autobiography is without doubt William Blake, mind you, the only representative of the Anglophone culture, which is, of course, an important consideration from our perspective tonight, not Anglistów. And this prominence of William Blake is very fittingly illustrated in the Polish edition, of Ziemia Ulro, where you have got what the picture named Newton, of course, painted by William Blake. And this prominence of Blake in Miłosz's autobiography is also captured in the title, The Land of Ulro, Ziemia Ulro, I would say in Polish, And this Ulro, is, of course, a name derived from Blake's mythology, from his prophetic writings. And now, why translate his complete poetry, his complete poetry and prose, his complete works? What does it mean that the project I'm describing, Polish Blake, Polski Blake, aims at translating the entire poetry and prose of William Blake? And in order to answer these questions, I'd like to take you to the William Blake archive. So I'm accessing this web page to give you a sense of Blake's opus. This is a resource that has been created over many years, collecting copies of Blake's works that are scattered all over the world. Yeah, I'll show you later. Yeah, and these works are grouped in this resource into several categories. Those which are of major interest from the perspective of that translatorial project I'm describing are Blake's manuscripts. Yeah, and now let me point to a few collections and works that I'll have a reason to reference later in this talk. So these are, among others, poetical sketches. You see the date. Blake was born 1757, so this is an Nelly collection. Yeah, also Tyrio, right, an Nelly book, right, and then the Four Zoas, right. Of course, as I said, right, we will translate everything. I'm just pointing out a few titles which will come up later in my talk tonight. Yeah. Yeah, and as for the Four Zoas, I like to show you a page from this manuscript. Yeah, and then most spectacularly, yeah, I move now to Blake's illuminated books. Yeah, you'll be most familiar with songs, probably songs of innocence and of experience. Let me find that famous tiger, right, among these plates. All right, yeah, it is. Yeah. Okay, back to the menu of the illuminated books. Right, you'll be probably also familiar with the Marriage of Heaven and Hell. Yeah, but in my presentation, I'll also have a reason to refer to much later, mature prophecies of Blake. Yeah, especially Milton. I'll show you a few plates later, and also the awesome Jerusalem. Let me show you just a few plates now. Okay. Yeah, so. This is the splendor of Blake's Jerusalem. Yeah, plate after plate. All right, and this one perhaps. Okay, and yet again back to the menu of Blake's illuminated books. So also featuring in my talk will be a couple of earlier prophetic books. That is Europe. Yeah, that's the one with the famous frontispiece. And then Thel, the book of Thel. Yeah, and I'm just giving you an overview of the available copies. Yeah, and you see, yeah, so they are held, yeah, as I told you earlier, right, by different libraries and museums in Great Britain and America. And I'd say, you know, it's not surprising that this fantastic output has attracted and impacted people all over the world. Yeah, look here. Yeah, I'm sharing a slide documenting this impact. So as you see, artists and painters, musicians, and of course a legion of men of letters, including a long list of Nobel laureates in literature. And it's not just our Miłosz. As you see, there's the Belgian Maeterlinck, the French Gide, the Spanish Jimenez. You've got the Chilean Neruda, the Greek Elites, as well as more recently, you've got Olga Tokarczuk, you know, with Prowadź swój pług przez Kościół marłych. I'm just producing this book. Yeah, Blake is very prominent in this now very famous novel, yet to such a degree that the title of this novel, perhaps you know it, yeah, but why not repeat it, right? The title is a citation from the Marriage of Heaven and Hell, the famous section, Proverbs of Hell. Let me show you. Now you see the proverb here. And also you see a number of other fantastic ones. Yeah, this is really the case with Blake. Whatever page or plate you open, you find marvels. Yeah. He whose face gives no light shall never become a star. Or another one, a fool sees a different tree than a wise man sees. Or a purple one, the busy bee has no time for sorrow. Yeah, so, you know, this is my favorite maxim for sad days. You know, the busy bee has no time for sorrow. Yeah. Yeah, and, you know, of course, the effect of this great impact, yeah, also, I'd say in many cases, the cause of this great impact, yeah, on the world's brilliant minds is the presence of Willam Blake in translation. Yeah? And in this context, I'd like to give you a few bibliographical details, yeah, derived from these two volumes, yes, which is the reception of Willam Blake in Europe, Volume 1, Volume 2, and a volume of the reception of Willam Blake in the Orient. Yeah, so I'll not be sharing a slide with you, but just cite some information derived from these books, which relate exactly to the presence, right, of Willam Blake in translation. Yeah, so some data, some bibliographical details. Yeah, well, yeah, so 2 extensive collections of translations into German, yeah, were published already in 17, no, not that early, not before Blake lives, right? 1907. Yeah, a 2-volume translation of the prophetic books into French, yeah, appeared in 1927, 1930. Then Blake's collected works in Japanese translation appeared in 1989. A project of translating the collected Blake into Romanian started in 2006. Then all Blake's works in Italian translation have been available since 2007. The prophetic books in Portuguese translation were published in 2009. In Spanish translation, 2014. In Russian translation, in 2016. So as you see, foes in a number of friends, yes, close, European, as well as distant, Oriental, have editions of Blake, complete Blake, mind you, or at least his complete prophetic writings translated into their languages. And with this in mind, I'd like now to reflect on the situation in Poland, okay? Yeah. So it will be good to realize that Blake has been present in Polish translation for almost 130 years. Yeah, because the first translations were published in 1894. Yeah, so next year we're going to have a round anniversary. Yeah, and these were translations by Leon Winiarski. Yeah, and in this context, the curiosity is that Winiarski's selection included a translation of the famous Tiger into Polish prose, right? Yeah. Other interesting early translations appeared in 1906, 56, yeah? And these were translations by Jan Kasprowicz, all right? Of some of the poetical sketches, yes, so you remember that early collection, and curiously, yeah, his translation of an obscure allegorical, mythical poem Tyriel, also showed it to you, right? And I say curiously because Kasprowicz's was the first translation of this poem in the world, right? Yeah, well, other than that, interesting translations of several minor pieces appeared in 1920s and 1930s in the literary magazines Krokwie and Kultura, and these were translations by Leopold Staff, right? And after that, over the years, Blake was translated by, among many others, right? Józef Czechowicz, of course, Czesław Miłosz, so selected minor pieces and then selected fragments from Blake's major prophecies, included in Miłosz's reflection on Blake in the Land of Ulro, right? Yeah, Blake was also translated by Zygmunt Kubiak, by Stanisław Barańczak, of course, right? Now, and then, most spectacularly perhaps, in 2001, Wiesław Juszczak translated Blake's major prophetic book, Milton, all right? And then in 2006, Maciej Słomczyński published his translation of another major prophetic book, that is the Four Zoas, all right? Yeah, whereas Blake's last major prophecy, that Jerusalem I showed you, it has been translated only in fragments. Yeah, curiously, Blake called Jerusalem his consolidated work. Yeah, and yet, in Poland, we only have shreds. And all right, but at any rate, when you look at this, right, it is fair to say that this is really a pretty large body of work, yeah, already existing in Polish translation. But, yeah, there are really a number of problems, okay? Yeah, and I'll just focus now on those problems, yeah? So the first thing is that many of these translations are unavailable, yeah? I'm not talking exclusively about, say, Leopold Staff's translations from the old magazines, yeah, but also, for instance, about Juszczak's, yeah, Wiesław Juszczak's fine translation of Milton, yeah. Yeah, as you see, I'm using, yeah, those copies. This is, I know, rather sad, right? Yeah, I'm using a Xerox copy because at the time I needed this book close at hand, it was simply unavailable. I couldn't buy it anywhere, yeah. And you know, ever since that time, yeah, I've developed like a sport of trying to hunt Juszczak, yeah, somewhere on the second-hand market, yeah. And look how frustrating, yeah. Okay, I'll be sharing with you, right? See, produkt niedostępny, yeah. Here, yeah, the yellow stripe, right? Przedmiot został zarezerwowany, sprzedany lub sprzedający zakończył publikację ogłoszenia. Yeah, here, on the right. Produkt niedostępny. Now here, yeah, look at the bottom, right? Księgarnie internetowe. Aktualnie nie znaleźliśmy ofert w księgarniach. And you know, I found just one offer, and the seller wanted 200 zlotys. Yeah? But I didn't buy it, you know, because I love my copies. I love my Xerox copies. Plus, I have invested quite a lot of time and work in these copies, yeah, because I added all the plates and line numbers, which the translator or the editor didn't provide. Yeah, yeah, but you know, anyhow, yeah, the fact that over a really long time I just found one copy, which I can't find anymore, right, does not change the overall conclusion that this product is niedostępny. Yeah? All right, now another aspect. Maciej Słomczyński was a fine translator, yeah, of Shakespeare, John Milton, of course Ulysses, yeah, Joyce. Yeah, but Maciej Słomczyński was not a Blakean. There are glaring errors in his translation of the Four Zoas. To give you one example, seeing here a page from the manuscript of the Four Zoas, yeah, I promised to show you a page, so here it comes. And here is an excerpt cut from the page along with Słomczyński's translation. Okay. Yeah, I would love to draw your attention particularly to what Słomczyński does with Blake's states. Yeah, you have got in the original, there is a state named Satan. Learn distinct to know, or Rahab, the difference between states and individuals of those states. I'll stop in here. Yeah, and what Słomczyński does with this passage is jest państwo zwane szatanem, wyucz się tego dokładnie, abyś poznała, o Rahab, różnicę między państwami a jednostkami w tych państwach. Okay, you know, this is a surprising, I would say, really compromising error. Blake is famous for his conception, theory of states. It was, for instance, yeah, one of the aspects of his system that attracted Miłosz. You know, let me cite from the Land of Ulro again. Yeah, the place where Miłosz zooms in on Blake's states. Yeah, first English. It's just a couple of sentences, of course, torn from the context, and yet showing you, you know, Słomczyński's error. Yeah, so that passage that I selected reads, only one sin then is truly unforgivable, the sin against the Holy Ghost. But if Swedenborg conceived of hell as a state freely willed, Blake held that not men, but his sinful state, sinful states were cast into eternal fire. Okay, and now, with this in mind, right, listen to the Polish version of that same passage, okay? Jeden więc tylko grzech jest naprawdę nie do przebaczenia. Grzech przeciwko duchowi, Ale podczas gdy Swedenborg uznawał piekło jako stan dobrowolnie wybrany, Blake wierzył, że w ogień wieczny wtrącone zostaną jedynie stany grzechu, przez które przechodzi człowiek, nie osoby. See? Yeah? A state is stan, not państwo. As I say, Sączyński was not a Blake. It seems that he didn't even care to digest the most famous and perhaps the most impactful Polish discussion, Blake. Now, for a change, Michał Fostowicz was a Blakean, but he was not a translator. Okay? He had manifest problems with English on various levels. Again, to give you a very simple example that will not take long analyzing. Here you see plate 77, the opening of the introduction to the last chapter of Jerusalem. I'm zooming in on a small detail, the famous inscription, a really famous, very often quoted inscription that opens this chapter. And now that excerpt, along with Michał Fostowicz's translation. See? He renders the grammar, for example, inaccurately. Blake says, I give you, not I'll give you. Yeah, in Blake, this is a fact, this is an act, and not some future promise. Also, Fostowicz was probably not aware that this passage rhymes. Yeah, it is, famous, as I told you. And if it is, so very often quoted, it is partly at least due to the fact that it is so shapely, so very carefully wrought. Now compare his translation versus, well, what can be considered a sample, perhaps, a teaser of our, I hope, forthcoming publication, Willam Blake, Dzieła Zebrane. All right, so summing up, right, what I have said so far, problems with availability, as well as problems with quality. Yeah. One other thing, is that when translating and publishing these works, or their fragments, as in the case of Fostowicz, the translators did not care about continuities. So Blake's work, Blake's system, developed over the years. And I say system, which is Blake's own word. In Jerusalem, he said, I must create a system or be enslaved by another man's. So his system, his mythology developed over a long time, and it includes a number of key concepts and key phrases which are carried from one work to another. Okay? But all these interactions, correlations between Blake's works are lost in Polish translations because one translator's choices did not coincide with another's, right? As all of them, of course, worked in isolation, treating the translation of individual books as what? Individual projects. And yet another thing, is, the way these books look. Most of them completely disregard the visual components, and compare Juszczak's Milton. Okay, not necessarily those copies of mine, try and buy, that one available copy for 200, then, well, if it is still available, of course, right? And juxtapose it, with the plates in the Willam Blake archive. So compare this to this, or plate 4, with this, another, plate 6 with plate 6 in Juszczak. And also, all these books give you extremely challenging poetry without any annotation. There is even no introduction. It just jumps outright into that challenging poetry. And there is just posłowie, curiously written by somebody else. So the translator felt courageous enough to translate this book, but did not find the courage to, write about it. Yeah, and also again, you see that my copy is meticulously overwritten with those indications of plate, or here page, and line numbers. Yeah, because the translator didn't care to provide such editorial apparatus. Yeah, in the case of Słomczyński's translation, after you do this pedantic work, of adding all those numbers, you realize that the version he used is not canonical. There are a number of differences between the organization of the text in the most canonical editions, including, for example, this book, you see how very fatigued, Erdmann's, the complete poetry in prose, so differences, various, differences in the organization of the text, right, between the canonical edition, and Słomczyński's translation, but of course, having no introduction, the translator didn't identify the version of the original from which he was translating. He didn't explain his reasons for choosing this version. Perhaps he didn't know that there are various readings. So in effect, I'd say this failure to do things, right? Failure to read, to check, to verify. Results in a really painful loss of time, loss of energy, and also loss of potential. There are many pages in Słomczyński's translation that are so good, and yet, overall, this book is no good. Okay? And now, against this background, I'll turn to that second part of my talk, that is, I'll tell you about the projected publication Willam Blake, Dzieła Zebrane. Okay, its conception and unique features, which are meant to first do justice to Blake at last. And second, deal with all these problems that I've been describing, while at the same time, taking advantage of this indisputably rich tradition of Blake in Polish. Polish Blake, remember? Polski Blake, okay? All right, okay? So, as I have mentioned earlier, Willam Blake, Dzieła Zebrane is an umbrella title. The projected critical edition of the entire poetry prose of Willam Blake in Polish translation is to be a 4-volume publication. And here you see a map of the individual volumes, their titles, focal points, along with the names of the translators. And two things, right, which I would like very, very much to emphasize is first, these translators will cooperate with one another so that the continuities between and within Blake's works are preserved. And second, these translators will also cooperate with a team of Blakeans, likewise involved in the project, representing, of course, literary studies, but not only, also other disciplines, like, for example, history of art or history of ideas. And the role of these scholars will be to verify the translations, as well as provide critical commentary. And, focusing for a moment on this fourfold division of Blake's opus, this is the feature of the publications which goes against the most canonical edition of Blake's work. So that book I've been showing you a moment ago, The Complete Poetry and Prose of Willam Blake, edited by David Erdmann. And clearly, this is an edition for specialists who do not need guidance or navigation, for instance, in terms of chronology. This book divides Blake's work into a number of categories, such as, hope you perhaps see the details here, right? First category is the works in illuminated printing. And after that, we've got the second category, which is prophetic works and engraved, which means that, for example, Milton and Jerusalem appear in this volume before the Iliad, the Four Zoas. And then Erdmann's third category is poetical sketches, as you see, which, as you remember, belongs to Blake's earliest works, whereas here it appears on page 400 something, right? And now back to the map of our projected publications, yeah, Willam Blake, Czesław Miłosz, yeah. So what we are going to have instead is 4 thematically consistent volumes, yeah. So yeah, thematically consistent, yeah, each following the chronology of specific types of Blake's work. Okay, so volume 1, rhymed, yeah, minor pieces in chronological order. So, you know, in effect, the early poetical sketches will appear as at the beginning of volume 1, yeah, not somewhere in the middle of the volume, right? Number 3, yeah. Then volumes 2 and 3, yeah, prophetic writings developing Blakesmith, yeah, so from the earliest, yeah, Tyriel, Thel, to Blake's consolidated work, Jerusalem, yeah, and then Varia, yeah, including, yeah, and focusing very much upon his prose writings and letters. So this fourfold division is one of the features that I'd like to emphasize very, very much, right, in this projected publication. And another unique feature of those volumes is that each of them will include elements of parallel edition, okay, of 2 types. First, parallel bilingual edition, that is, the original will be reproduced in the form of the illuminated plates. Yes, so for example, in volume 1, you'll have Songs of Innocence and Experience published in this form. In volume 2, the poem Europe, and then the Book of Thel. Yeah, and second, there will also be elements of parallel Polish language edition, yeah, where the new translations will be juxtaposed with a representation of earlier Polish translations, interesting from more historical, artistic point of view. Yeah, and in volume 1, for example, a new translation of the Tiger will be juxtaposed with a range of earlier translations, from Winiarski's prose translation to perhaps Barańczak's. And, you know, they are so numerous, in fact, that in the translation of Peter Ackroyd's biography of Blake, the translator, Ewa Kraskowska, in the chapter devoted to the Tiger, gives you the original, of course, followed by 4 different Polish language versions. Yeah, and in the discussion, she relies on the 5th one, which is her own. Yeah, so not finding any of these satisfactory for the purposes, right, of the analysis provided by Ackroyd. Yeah, so quite curious, quite intriguing, isn't it? Yeah, and also, you know, she also gives a footnote in which she refers the reader to Barańczak's mały, lecz maksymalistyczny manifest translatologiczny, which includes a critique of 3 other translations of the Tiger. Yes, and this, mind you, is by no means an exhaustive list of important Polish translations of this song. Yeah? Okay, yeah, so to give you another example of those elements of parallel Polish language edition to appear in our volumes, yeah, so there will be, of course, a reproduction of those unavailable translations, for example, by Leopold Staff. Yeah? And yet another example, we will reprint in the 2nd volume Kasprowicz's translation of Tyriel. Yeah? And, you know, having told you about the conception of these publications, about the fourfold division, about the translators, about the form of these translators' work, plus about the original and translated material that will be included in these volumes, I'd like to conclude by saying a few things about, you know, the work of that team of Blake scholars involved in the project, whose role will be to give these volumes the character and scope of a truly critical edition. And remember, this is going to be a 4-volume publication, which means that, yeah, there will be plenty of space for that critical commentary and that editorial apparatus, yeah, annotations, appendices, yes, so that is all those elements that the Polish editions, yeah, I've mentioned before and presented before, lack. Okay? And so in this context, the first thing I'd like to emphasize very much is that the conception of these volumes, yeah, the fact that each is consistent thematically and organized chronologically, means that the introductions to these books will compose a logically unfolding and I hope very much riveting story. So Introduction to Volume 1, for example, right, introducing, of course, the entire project will focus on Blake as a poet and artist, largely through the prism of his reception in England and in the world, but also the history of his reception in Poland. You know, Polish Blake, you remember. Yeah? And let me mention in this context that I worked on the reception of Willam Blake in Poland for nearly a decade. That was as the Polish representative in the project, the reception of Willam Blake in Europe. Okay, my chapter for this Bloomsbury book, second volume, includes references to a huge number of Poles who played a role in that history: poets, writers, of course, translators, publishers, scholars, intellectuals, yeah, but also artists like Henryk Wanik, Urszula Broll, Jarosław Markiewicz, also musicians, composers, Weronika Markiewicz, Michał Górczyński. Yeah? And you know, as yet, all these really valuable materials are available exclusively in the English language here, right? And within our project, Polski Blake, all these materials will be first updated, so they'll be better, right? Adapted for the purposes and the needs of the Polish reader, yeah? And thirdly, they will be presented in the form of a story in the introduction to Volume 1, as I told you, yeah, but also in an appendix in the form of an exhaustive chronological table giving the full bibliography of Blake-related works, translations, criticism, published in the Polish language. Yeah, and of course the direction of the introductions to the following 3 volumes will just as naturally correspond to their content. Yeah, so no repetitions, pure developments, with introductions to Volume 2 and 3 focused on Blake's mythology. Yes, in Volume 2 you'll get what you need to know and what you want to know. Yeah, that is the roots, the formation, the development in Eli prophetic books. And then in Introduction to Volume 3 will be presented an attempt to interpret, yeah, with of course reference to the most impactful critical discussions, Blake's major mature prophecies, that is Milton and Jerusalem. Okay, and the introduction to the final volume will focus especially on the relations between Blake's poetry and his prose, so his theory, versus his artistic and poetic practice. Yeah, and then in the section devoted to Willam Blake's letters, there will be a discussion of his relations with his contemporaries. All right, and also, of course, throughout the volumes, each work will be carefully annotated with notes explaining specifically Blakean concepts, intricate passages, you know, Blake's references, his self-references, yeah? So as you see, you get from these volumes what you can legitimately expect from a pedigree critical edition. Plus, you'll get more than that. You'll get more than you can expect, because there'll be additional discussion of all the works presented in the form of the parallel edition. And in the case of the text reprinted along with the original illuminated plates, this discussion will focus primarily on the interaction, that is, parallels, but also tensions between the text and the illumination. And I say parallels and tensions because in many cases, Blake's illuminations do not simply illustrate his text. They do something more, sometimes something else. Yeah, think of, for example, the illumination accompanying that famous tiger. There's a tiger, burning bright. What immortal Hendurai could frame thy fearful symmetry? This is the image you get from the text. And the question is, so why does the image that accompanies that text, right, look so much like a tamed cat? Yeah. And of course, what will also be addressed in the way is a more basic question of Blake's methods of production. And you know, one of the ideas to enhance this discussion is to reproduce in the second volume 2 different copies of the Book of Thel. Okay, let me show you. this is not extravagant to have two different versions, because this is really the shortest of Blake's early prophetic books. Yeah, and now to give you an example of one plate from these two copies. Okay, yeah, look, yeah. So this certainly prompts the reflection on how the poem's tone, yeah, and in effect its interpretation, its implications, may depend on the way it was eventually finished. A potentially fine discussion showing, well, the richness of Blake, the challenge of Blake, and also, I believe, an attractive conception of the publication of this work, yeah, in translation, where not only the translations but also the originals themselves, mind you, their final shape will be given in more than one version. And on the other hand, to finish with emphasis on Polish Blake, Polski Blake. In the case of the text presented in the form of parallel Polish language edition, those earlier translations will be given, yeah, well, of course, translatological commentaries, for example, a discussion of various approaches to the translation of the Taiga, accompanying our overview of Polish language versions, yeah, but also other types of commentary. So for example, in the case of Leopold Staff's translations, this will be additionally more philological and historical analysis focused on the fact, that his translations were clearly not based on Blake's originals. They were based on German translations. Yeah, and this will be, of course, accompanied by a reflection on the dynamic of Poland's cultural exchange with Europe in the interwar period. Yeah? Or to give you another example, in Volume 2, such additional philological, historical, biographical, bibliographical commentary will be given to Kasprowicz's translation of Tyriel. And we'll try to solve that puzzle. What specific considerations might have prompted Kasprowicz's decision to choose this poem as material for translation? Yes, as I have iterated, right? Yeah, reiterated. Yeah, he was just the first person in the world to do that. Okay, and of course I could multiply those examples, but I hope very much you'll be able to find them in, now Willam Blake, Dzieła Zabrane. Okay, so no more spoilers tonight. I'll finish with just one last citation from Willam Blake. It's been enough. Too much. Thank you.